Would you agree that not all horror movies need to be scary, full of ghosts and gore, to be considered a horror movie? Well, if you agree with that statement, then this is the horror movie for you. From the twisted mind of Joko Anwar, the man behind In Pedigore and Satan's Slaves, comes this psychological horror thriller from 2009. Usually I preface these videos to say that the movies I talk about in this series are not necessarily the best Asian horror movies of all times, they're just movies you must watch. But this one is different. This is a brilliant movie and definitely earns the title of must-watch Asian horror movie. Hi, I'm the Arty Dans, and alongside my friends from Movies and Mania, we're going to take a detailed look at this 2009 Indonesian horror thriller, The Forbidden Door. Just a heads up, this is a movie discussion, but unfortunately will contain spoilers as I explore the movie in more detail. I'd recommend watching the film beforehand, before going any further than the story chapter. Alternatively, just enjoy the exploration of this excellent film. I'm going to keep this simple as to not give too much away. Gambir is a talented artist with a niche for sculptures of pregnant women. He has what appears to be a very supportive network, a beautiful wife, a doting mother, an encouraging manager who doubles as a father figure, and two childhood friends in awe of his talent and success. But Gambir starts seeing a mysterious message asking for help from someone who appears to be a small child. While he explores the origins of the message, he stumbles across a red door in his studio, followed by a stern message from his wife: "Don't ever open the door." Again, if you haven't seen the movie and it sounds interesting to you, I'd recommend stop watching this video, go and watch the movie, and then come back to me. Being an Indonesian film, it's easy to assume that this is going to be a gore fest, but surprisingly, Joko Anwar holds back, allowing the theme of child abuse to be front and center of the horror in this film. It's a tough movie to watch, especially as it gets into the second half as our main character starts to uncover what's going on around him, and it leads to some surprisingly difficult and uncomfortable viewing. And that's not a bad thing, as horror isn't just about masked killers, ghosts, and blood. Real horror is about exploring themes that are abhorrent, and this film does it with class. On top of the visual elements, it's the audio, especially the music, but also the rather loud ambient sounds that contribute to the general unease when watching this film. There was quite a few times where it was the music that was making me feel uncomfortable, not what I was watching on screen. The opening jazz song feels out of place. Or does it? It gives off a very 1960s feel and reminded me a little of the intro sequence to Catch Me If You Can. There's an upbeat and fast piece during the scene of Gambir creating his sculptures, but then during the sequence when Gambir chases the boy through an abandoned building, we get this almost tribal, out of sync drum beating. It's a very awkward but uncomfortable piece of music. There is a scene at the beginning that will quite literally have you thinking, what the fuck am I about to watch? If you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm referring to. A shot of a static 1960s or 1970s style kitchen that's all of a sudden interrupted by a child being flung across the screen onto the table, smashing it. The movie then carries on as if nothing happened. And that's the whole point. The director has made note to highlight that early on in the film. We, the audience, are witness to this grotesque scene of child abuse, but then we're happy to carry on as if nothing happened, not wondering at all what happened to the child or why it occurred in the first place. And in fact, there are several massive clues in this scene that reference the content in the rest of the film. The era is a big clue, especially when you notice the Art Deco style posters, buildings, and billboards in the background that look very much out of place for a movie set in modern times. This is emphasized even further when Gambir is sitting in front of the TV in Hirosase, the private members only club where torture, kinks, and other seedy elements that aren't discussed in a polite society are broadcast via closed-circuit TV. The TV set looks old, albeit in widescreen. The image on screen is black and white, and his surroundings? If this doesn't scream 1950s or 60s to you, then I don't know what will. But the rest of the film is just littered with visual imagery and clues. Some of those clues are obvious, like the painting of the eye over the door to imply someone's always watching, and some are not so obvious, such as the dialogue between Gambir and the man in the abortion clinic at the start, just one of many conversations Gambir has with other characters that provide a deep insight into his life, mental state, and the truth about this movie. The strongest and most obvious theme is child abuse, and how society looks away and chooses not to get involved. And how helpless you can feel even if you do want to rescue the child involved. It's an uncomfortable theme, but it's not the only one. There's the themes of family and couples dynamics, with a complete role reversal of the stronger, dominant partner. We see this in the opening scene with how Gambir's wife seems to have almost total control over him and his career. There are more scenes littered throughout this movie that show both her and his mother's dominance over his life. There's the theme of abortion and unwanted pregnancies, about art imitating life, and greed and exploitation. Joko Anwar explores all of these themes and more, using a variety of different techniques and methods. Even this scene here gave me a Hitchcock vibe, where he would use innuendo and symbolism to circumvent the restrictive Hollywood Hays Code. What do you think that shot represents within the context of that scene? But once Gambir works out, or at least thinks he works out, what's going on, we, the audience, are witness to an insane and typically Indonesian ending. The Christmas dinner, where Gambir thinks he is revealing the truth to his wife, his family, and his best friends. Where a man who was held back and looked down on thinks he's getting his revenge onto all the people who have wronged him. But as the audience watching this, how wrong we all are. It's only when Gambir decides to ignore his wife's original plea to not open the red door that the real truth is revealed. And I have to admit, while I had my suspicions, I didn't see this ending coming. Sure, it's not original. We've seen many movies where the events and characters are just figments of the main character's imagination, building a world using elements within their periphery. Movies like The Wizard of Oz or The Usual Suspects. And of course, this technique has been replicated since this was released, with films like Inception and the excellent Chinese horror thriller Haunted Road. But that ending is what makes this movie even more powerful. And other than this scene, and perhaps the one preceding it with the washed out colours, there really is no indication throughout the film of what the ending could be, and even then, you'd only make this link at the end of the film, not during it. The mystery and suspense in this movie kept me on the edge of my seat. I judge a movie's ability to hold my interest based on how many times I've flicked through my phone while watching it, and while I did flick through my phone during the movie, I paused the movie while I did it so I wouldn't miss anything. Perhaps next time I'll just put my phone on silent and ignore it. I loved not knowing what was coming up next. That's the suspense element building up. I fully expected Gambir to go on a mission to save the young boy he watches on the TV in the Hirosase Club, and by doing that, destroying his marriage and perfect life. So while I expected his life to get destroyed in some capacity, I didn't expect it to play out the way it did. And that's what made it such a gripping movie to watch, not knowing what was about to happen next and being proven wrong when the next scene came up. I'm glad I didn't pick the end, because it made me enjoy it that much more. As you can tell with other movies I've looked at in this series, it's always a gripping storyline that keeps me glued to my screen, not the ghosts and gore. It's hard to make that stuff fun and exciting anymore, but there's always plenty of scope with psychological horror films. You should watch it because you have an interest in really exploring Asian horror cinema beyond J-horror ghost stories and Korean zombie films. You should watch it because you want to be thrilled and entertained. You want to guess what happens next and be in awe that a film like this has emerged from Indonesia, where gore films tend to reign supreme. I think you're in for a real treat with this film. This is the true definition of a must-watch. If you've seen this movie, what did you think? I hope you enjoyed this detailed look at The Forbidden Door. We have many more best of and worst of Asian horror movies to look at over the coming year, so if you're interested, please press the like button and consider subscribing to watch the latest videos as they're released.